And so Bank of America really worked hard to acquire and gain business in New York and on Wall Street. But on Wall Street, it's still Bank of America doesn't have that name, that brand does not have the validity that Merrill Lynch does or U.S. Trust does. So it really depends on the business aspect of the bank. If it's wealth management, we're not going to say Bank of America. Bank of America is just banking to most people. If you're talking wealth management, then we're going to say Merrill Lynch. And that's again understanding domestically. And I think one of the things that sometimes we lose when people think uh, cultural differences, we forget that in the United States, there's still a huge cultural difference here domestically. And we have to be cognizant of that when we're talking to our employees throughout the country because it really, I hate to say it, but it's still a difference. So we work to strike that balance where we want all of our employees to feel the same in domestically as well as internationally, but we still have to be culturally sensitive.
For you and maybe all of you, I went to the PR meeting yesterday and you said that there's verbiage with different countries. When there's a crisis and you need to get the word out immediately, do you have a team from each of those countries that writes it for you, how they would understand it, or how do you get it out?
Well, sure, we do. That's a great question. We have contracted with PR people on the ground in these countries, people that Mayo Clinic has had relationships with for many, many years. We also have somebody who is contracted through Mayo Clinic out of Miami, who is multilingual, who helps in coordinating a lot of that translation with these countries. And it's not just Latin America, it's in the Middle East and other parts of the world too. But when there is an issue, when there is a crisis, when something's happening, we develop communications and it is translated. And it is probably, with something like an issue, probably about 30 people will go through that, including physicians, and including people who have had decades experience working in public affairs and issues management. So yes, that information. For example, there was an issue that happened, was very well known here locally. Just a couple years ago, there was an issue where a Mayo Clinic technician was diverting drugs, and diverting drugs is something that happens at hospitals throughout the country. It really is a very sad and awful situation, but just is basically stealing drugs and using them, and it's something that can be easily caught. But this person was getting away with it, managed to infect patients, and through an investigation we were able to determine how that happened through infectious diseases people. But there were patients that were coming from overseas, and there was probably a population of about 5,000 patients that could have been exposed to this person. So that obviously narrows down to 3 patients, which was what happened. But that was an issue, that was a crisis. There were patients that were affected from overseas. So there's communications that have to be developed to be sent to those and follow up. And there has to be hotlines developed. And so you have to have multi-language hotlines for people to be able to call in, and people who are able to field those calls from people from all parts of the world. And so that was something that was an all hands on deck. Everybody in our department living and breathing that issue for 2.5 years. And so Mayo Clinic was very transparent throughout the whole situation, just reassuring patients and the public that it was safe to go to Mayo Clinic, that this was an isolated incident, something that we were able to uncover, that there were steps in place to make sure that that would never happen again. And so the employee that did that was obviously terminated right away, and eventually was prosecuted and was convicted and is now serving prison time. And so it was a very sad and tragic situation, something that's happened at hospitals and all around the country, and it's just something that you never want to see happen, obviously from a public affairs standpoint. But we were talking yesterday about if you have to if you're a PR person or a public affairs person and you have to be involved or you want to be involved in issues management, crisis communications, I actually enjoy the work. I hate that it happens, and I hate that things happen to the brand and things happen to people. But the work is very exciting. It's very challenging, and so Mayo Clinic came out of that because we were so transparent, because we actually did the investigation ourselves and reported it to the media and to the public. The media was very positive about what we did as an institution. Patients were very grateful for what we did, and the public at large was very grateful too. So the brand did not suffer any negative hits from that whole issue. But to your original point, yes, there's lots of communications that have to be done in a that's an issue and that's a crisis. But every day there's something that isn't an issue or a crisis, where communications have to be translated, have to be checked, because even with Portuguese, there's many different ways to that some translators in Rochester and translator in Florida may not see eye to eye on translation. So we have to be very careful of what we say and what we do.
You mentioned don't believe what you think, and you say
Yeah, don't believe everything you think. I think, so interesting for me to listen to both of you. One of the most important things, whatever your field, and learning and dealing and working with other cultures, is I'm trying to think of the word, it's not exactly humility, but to really want to learn about their culture, to honor, respect, and not be, this is how we're doing things. So in producing, or in any line of work, if you are genuinely interested in, gosh, what can I learn? What can I add to my life from this culture, from this experience, from this person? It's a much better place to be in than even what you read and are taught about a culture. Because just like here, there are no two people alike anywhere. Well, Normandy, France, I don't know how many people have had the pleasure of being or working or living in any part of France. Okay, so you both know it's as different as, Paris and Honfleur, or Paris and Normandy, that area are as different as New York City and Savannah, Georgia. It's not just one big country. So part of the series we were doing for Discovery was really about how you can travel and experience the more authentic parts. I had always heard, read, been taught that French people can't stand Americans. I had worked there many years before doing this series, but mainly in Paris. So I'm thinking we have to address this. Normandy, where the cemeteries are just unbelievable to see. Like anything else, until you see it, you just can't believe the thousands upon thousands upon thousands. So in researching, which is the most important thing, we always have someone who knows the area, is an expert in whatever field that we bring in to work with us on a series. One of the people I spoke with in doing pre-pro said, oh, I have a friend whose daughter puts flowers on the graves of the American soldiers. every week. And I said, what are you talking about? I've never heard of this. Well, had you heard of this? No? Have you heard of this? Yes. Are you from Paris or?
Yeah.
Yeah, Paris is a country all its own. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, yeah, I was born in Paris, but I moved a lot in France. So right now I come from Alsace, near Germany.
Beautiful. Well, so it took a long while to find exactly what it was, but it was a program that was started probably 40 years ago. A widow of one of the soldiers wanted to put flowers on the grave of her husband, and she could not get over there, so she contacted the government. They contacted people in the little small town that's near Normandy. The mayor of the town decided, you know what, we will put these on the grave for this woman. So it started, and the schools have kept it going ever since. They have a little box at the, it's a national park of America. That is where this is, which when you're getting permits for everything, you find out all these things. But they didn't know about it. You know, there they are standing there every day and seeing people come and put flowers and just don't know. But that is something that they do, the school children, to remember their history, to honor the people that came up on that beach. And I thought, okay, so we put that, our host, Samantha Brown, did a really good job because, I mean, have any of you ever heard of anything like that? No, and don't you kind of always get the idea that they resent us all over the world? Everybody resents Americans. No, they don't. They resent egotistical, arrogant, ignorant more than anything. It's just, we have so much to learn from any place we go. Here in this room today, we did learn a lot. One thing is, in Italy, no one is ever going to meet you, no matter what time you say your meeting is, before 10 or 10:30 in the morning. I know that sounds ridiculous, but have you worked over there? You know, they'll say, no, well, maybe, you know, whatever. You're just going to be sitting there. In many ways, I don't know if you have the same experience. It's kind of amazing. Some of the South American countries, they stay up almost all night. You know, they go home and rest in the afternoon. They have these little yerba mate. Have you heard of that? We put these in our shows, by the way, so people can see. Anybody ever heard of yerba mate? Yeah, which is kind of like a constant little bit of a caffeine thing going on. And so they carry it around like we do our water bottles, or did, but it's in this weird little container. Use silver and all that. Yes, and they drink it all day, and they just can stay up all night. They go home briefly, some, in the late afternoon, maybe rest. I don't know what they do, because we're Americans, we work all the time. But then they go out to dinner at like 9, 10 o'clock at night. I'm talking totally fit, beautiful people eating steaks this big, drinking, having a great time, going home at 1, and then boom, there they are back with the yerba mate, hearing on the streets. So part of it is just learning and, you know, gathering what we can. A lot of the slow food, that whole eating non-processed foods and everything came from, with the secret's out. We've been to these places and seen how fabulous it can be. You can eat all these courses, cheese, whatever, but you just have to move and not eat processed food. It's just interesting, and going to open your mind to think about what do these people have to say to us in programming, whether it's, you know, speaking with them about medical issues, which nothing could be more important. Money makes the world go round still. And I'll just be honest, in it changed my life. Each and every country that I went to, I do the development. I get a show up and running, the client happy with what we're doing, and the crew's happy with what they're doing. And I don't get to go on all the shoots. I do love it. But whether it was working out, doing scenes at the Vatican with the Pope, which you can do, you just have to let them know what you're doing, go through all the steps, and just fascinating to see that. And talk about speaking many languages. Pope John Paul II, I think it was 14, and he did speak to people in all those languages that day, which was pretty amazing. But it is so important to just take in what you can from each other. Now we know from DNA that we're all connected. I mean, we really are. And diversity, just imagine how boring anything would be without it. So anything you do, any job you take, any company you start, anything, it's just the strength. It's the strength of our country. It's the strength of any effort in medicine, and financing goes way beyond that. It's any strength that there is, the diversity is innate. But division, which you see in the media a lot, I don't know why there are networks that are for this ethnic group and this and this and this. All of the research shows that's asinine. Seriously. I mean, you think, well, then why do they have them? Because they're just used to it. It is people, the numbers in broadcast television have been, as you well know, because who's watched TV in the last month? Right. Our network is digital, it is online, it's 3 minutes or 3 hours of watching, but even though it's been this way for at least, almost a decade, the people, starting with the money, the advertisers, the agencies, just would not believe it. You know, it's like, no, they're not going to stop watching these shows on broadcast TV. So finally, because of technology, it's out there. And I think you're seeing whether it's music, entertainment, information, lifestyle programming, you're seeing the natural diversity that does exist rather than some manufactured, this is what we think you are, this is what we think you are. You're going to be a part of the biggest revolution in entertainment. How many know CBS went to streaming last week? Yeah, HBO. I mean, we've been in these meetings for the past 5 years with our network with everyone saying, no one's going to watch shows on their phone. You know, no, honestly, it's just, okay. Well, now finally, because advertising dollars now more online than on otherwise tipped this past year. Now people are following that. But I think it's nothing but good news for when you talk about diversity and dealing with it, it's good. But the one thing I would like to say to everybody is just don't believe everything you think. Don't be divided. We're not divided. We're just not. I think it's just such a grandpa thing. You know what I mean? It's just so strange, and I'm glad to see so many people in this class today. But just think of DNA. You know that. Everybody knows we all go back to one little place in Africa. It's the truth. You all know this. We've all seen it. People can say whatever. DNA, diversity, not alienation. And anytime you see that it's dividing, just know that it's for some purpose that's not what you think. So diversity in thought, I hope you are reading, watching. I know that both of you know that in the jobs that we're in, it's so important to see all different points of view, all different kinds of people, to learn and study and demographics. But each and every one of you, probably many of you, if you're like the rest of the UNF doing things already, but do your own research. Make sure that you're not just being with people that think like you, act like you, look and see and don't believe everything you think. Would you say?
I would completely agree. That was very helpful. For me, something that I failed to mention earlier, and I think Professor Stephanie mentioned way back when in the bank, I was asked to step up as the first diversity communications manager for the bank. And it was for a reason. Very well, what she said, we had a lot of efforts going on within the bank, but it was all disjointed. And the company was trying to find really what did diversity mean for the bank, and how do we communicate that? How do we get, so a lot of what I do that I think you guys will need to know and learn that skill from a communications perspective. Why I think you're sitting in here, not just, I want to work for a company that also has employees outside of the country, but being culturally competent is one thing. But understanding that diversity is way more, obviously, than race and gender. It is an experience, as Cindy said, it's diversity of experience, it's diversity of thought, it's diversity of location, it's diversity of so many things. So what the company was trying to communicate to their employees is that diversity and inclusion, and those are two different things. What that means, because we have all of these people that have come together to make this corporation. So as communicators, our job is to not just say, oh, diversity is important, but to truly, number one, weave that into everything that you do, because that's a part of the corporation. So for Bank of America, we wanted to become the best place to work, not just here in the United States, but globally. So how do we do that? We have to understand our employees. We have to understand the best way to communicate, the best way to motivate, the best way, and that's what they're going to be looking at you guys to do. You as communicators, you're the counselors of communications. So if there's a new opportunity or if there's a problem, your job is to counsel how to communicate. So for me, as I had shared with the students yesterday, my expertise is change communication. So I do a lot of strategy to say, here's where we are, here's where we need to be. And if you just guess it, as Cindy said, if you just assume you know, you're going to miss the mark almost every single time because you're shooting in the dark. So for us, we had, as well as domestically, but we also had teammates and colleagues, and why I got to know them so well outside of the country that we could counsel with, that we could talk to. So I have communication partners in London, in Spain, in Hong Kong, where we could say, okay, I have the council meetings with them. Okay, guys, here's something coming down. So I'm different than Kevin. I don't like crisis. I like to plan it. I like to think it through. Crisis is not my idea of a good time. So I'm more of the strategy where we say we know that we want to change thoughts, we want to change actions, we want to change behaviors. It's really hard to change beliefs. But if we want people to understand the company, or we want them to do something differently, or we want them to understand a new process, or the bank is doing. So to do that, that's different. You have to realize that because of diversity, you communicate that differently here in the United States than you would in Hong Kong. And it's from not just a strategy perspective, but tactics. So understanding that, having that counsel, and not thinking that you know it all, because from a company that's headquartered in the United States. Let's say that we're moving into a new direction, okay? So now we say, okay, guys, we're going to start doing it this way now. We're going to start moving left. If the company in the United States just keeps telling someone in Hong Kong, now we're moving left, that it doesn't make sense. Why? Why are we doing that? Who's the right person saying that? If they're just hearing it from somebody sending an email, it's not going to make sense. So you have to have that counsel to say, in Hong Kong, they do listen to email. They are fine with getting an email from corporate. In London, they really don't particularly still care for that. They want to hear it from the manager. So you have to know that. So what we would do is say, okay, here's our strategy for the company. Boom. This is what we're looking to do. Then you look at your partners in the different countries to then customize it, to make it more, to extend it, to make it more meaningful, to understand, okay, yes, so it's still going to happen, but now it makes more cultural relevance, because now instead of the CEO telling employee in Spain that this is the new company direction, their manager is actually the one saying it, or their regional lead. Or if we're creating communications to, an email, a newsletter, to be honest with you, in Asia, they still would prefer to see Asian faces than to see. So here in the United States, we can use more culturally diversified images. So we're still moving them along with that because they're a part of a company that strongly believes in diversity. And so we're working with them, and they're trying, but that's a cultural difference. Let's talk about recognition. So here in the United States, I could say, you know what, Promise, you did a great job, and we're going to give you, we're going to give you recognition points, and you can use your points. So she's all excited, and she goes out there, she looks at her points, and this is really what the bank does. She goes out there and she looks at her points, and she says, I'm going to get me a new iPad, right? That's exciting. And you tell all your friends, I did such a great job. My company gave me an iPad. Well, if you live in Hong Kong and in your culture, you live in a smaller house, and you've got extended family living there, you don't really, that doesn't say the same thing to you. You're not going to say, oh, my company cares so much that they gave me an iPad. No, my company cared so much that they took care of my electric bill. Really? That's the kind of feedback that you have to know as a communicator. So when you tell then the leadership, oh, we want to do this, they're depending on you then to counsel the right way, because as communicators, we're not just telling people things. We're also trying to get buy-in. We're trying to get engagement. We're trying to get people to adopt different things. So that's just taking communication to a level. And I just wanted to mention that because I don't want us to just think about, translating words, but it's also knowing how to create a change in folks, and that cultural competency is what's most important from a strategic perspective.
What a good word, cultural competency. Some countries, only a man can speak to a man.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. I mean, nobody wants to say it, but so what? I mean, I would have the production assistant that we have from the country working with us. This is what so what? And it's not only the places you're thinking either,
Right.
but whatever. And then there's the generational, there's the whole, so whatever needs to be done to be successful in what you're doing. That's what I mean by listening, being sensitive, and opening our minds too, because by the time it's over, the experience that you have, you'll just think differently. Or I've found that's the case whatever we're doing. Hawaii, I sent my pre-production meeting schedule. They sent back, you're never going to get this much done. I said, what do you mean this needs, and they said, No, you will meet everyone. You'll have time getting to know them. You'll enjoy some meals with these people. And I'm thinking, that's just too good to be true. That can't be right. They can't pay me for that. You bring a gift to every meeting. I know this sounds strange. Do you have that? Is Hawaii part of where you go?
It's not.
Yeah. Oh well.
Too bad. You need to work on that.
And it's because it's so many of the cultures that make up Hawaii that they brought with them to that, and it is really the truth. And so, you end up thinking that's nice. We just jump in there, and many European countries the same thing. They think it's just so rude at a meal to be sitting there taking out papers or going over a schedule or whatever. So a lot of the things I think we should bring back with us and incorporate them into what we're doing. But yeah, got to have your person who knows on the ground. What do you call them? Your people that cultural competence.
They're communication colleagues or partners.
And
They do the same work that I do, but they're in other countries, so I have to depend on their counsel as well. So from a corporate perspective, I say, okay, guys, we've got this thing coming up, and we're working on the strategy, and then include them as a part of that, because what we've found over the years that we've made the mistake of
wasting a lot of time and money.
Well, just pushing it out, and so people
Right.
feel as if it's been done to them instead of. And the bank was very big on U.S. and OUS. We called it OUS, outside the U.S. Well, if you were outside the U.S., how does that make you feel? It doesn't make you feel included, does it? Well, no one was thinking that way. We were just saying, here's our messages for U.S. and here's our OUS messages. Well, you've already, kind of pissed people off before you even started, and you want them to adopt it when you know what I'm saying? So it's that kind of thing that you've had to learn. It's kind of really where we kept having update meetings, which was fine for the UK because they're 5 hours away. But okay, in Asia it's 12 hours, so we're asking someone to sit at a meeting at 9 o'clock at night. Well, they're going to do it a couple of times. After a while, they're going to say, you know what, you guys, can you have a meeting during our work time? So yes, we have some meetings. I'm sitting in my office at home in the middle of the night. And my husband looks at me like, oh my God. He works for the bank, so he gets it. Just like my wife's crazy. And I'm sitting on the phone in the middle of the night. But you have to do that because you have to, it's a part of, if you want to be a global company, there's sacrifices. There's things you kind of have to do. And, one other thing I'll just say, finally, it's so funny because people, everyone wants to be a part and everyone wants to get along. Then after a while, people say, you know what, it's really getting on my nerves that you guys keep sending us these American videos. All we hear are these American accents, and we're like, oh, makes sense.
Of course.
So that's why we spend more time asking and including our colleagues instead of just sending it out. People don't want to have things done to them. They're not going to adopt it if you don't ask them if this is the best way for them.
And how about in South America, when people on the crew, well, we're Americans. Really? No, we're Americans. It's America before we were ever a country. So they don't, it's just funny.
Yeah.
They consider themselves Americans first. And we're just the United States. Isn't that, it's funny.
Yeah, I had a tip too that I want to share, but I know there's another group. Doug had a question.
I did have a question, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I guess if you could expound a little more about inclusion and what that really looks like as a PR professional, how could we convey that message more or less in our day-to-day activities?
Okay, so for diversity means difference in, there's lots of differences that come to make one company, one team, one opportunity. Inclusion is then saying we need to make sure everyone feels included, everyone feels they have the opportunity to be successful, everyone is a part of the team. So communicating inclusion then, and it's really, it's almost kind of just a basic level. I will do a lot with younger kids, and as we all know, bullying is a part of, it's a big issue that kids have to deal with. When they're younger, they are, I don't like you, I'm going to beat you up kind of thing. But when they get older, it changes. Kids aren't going to straight up say, I'm going to hit you, but what they do in a way to bully is they don't include you. It's a lack of inclusion. And sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it's not. So you have people that may be a part of your organization, and they're not engaged because they don't feel included. And that's some of the things that I was kind of touching on a little bit before. When you have a global organization, and even domestically, and you say, okay, everyone's a part of the team, but if you're just funneling stuff out, and they're, and I'm talking about not just from a general level, but if you say to senior leaders in Japan, okay, the bank's doing this now, here you go, you guys push it out. They don't really feel included as a part of the solution. So communicating inclusion, so we started several years back saying diversity and inclusion, because people were just focusing on the diversity part and not really communicating that inclusion also means creating an environment, and that's mostly for our leaders. And then we found that it is everyone's responsibility at the company for inclusion. You want everyone, no matter who they are, if they are a part of the team, to feel like their voice can be heard and that they are a part of the solution for the company. And I'll share just one other quick story. The bank, several years ago, they were really big on Bank of America spirit, and they spent a lot of time with Disney and learned, Disney's awesome with that, right? So they have all these thoughts and processes where when you go to Disney, when you see them, they're on stage. Their employees are on stage.
Cast members.
Exactly. So the bank spent a lot of time learning that, and they wanted the bank to really embody that they wanted their customers to feel like when they came into a banking center, when they dealt with someone on the phone, they felt that Bank of America spirit. So we had, and I was a part of that, we would have the training, the communications, and what does Bank of America spirit, because that's, again, it's a move, it's a change. We want people to adopt, to understand. So then we had a merger with Boston Fleet, which is a different culture. So here we are like, okay, now you're a part of Bank of America, so we're going to give you our Bank of America training. And they marched in the Bank of America Spirit team, and they were all on the stage. I mean, it's like this whole show. And let's cheer. This side's going to cheer, and this side's going to cheer. And these folks in Northeast, oh, they're just sitting there looking at, I'm like, really? This is what y'all are doing to us now? We work for a bank. We're not. So it wasn't. It was a lot of feeling like, we don't feel like we don't get this. People were leaving because it didn't resonate. It didn't resonate, and they did not feel included. So then it did honestly become a North-South thing. We don't want to be a part of the Southern Bank. They're way too excited for us. And so people had to kind of so hopefully that answers your question, the difference between diversity and inclusion. And I'll shut up because I know Kevin's got great stuff to share.
Well, I just wanted to just share one tip, and I think this is solid for anybody who wants to be in a career of media relations, in public relations. Know what's going on around you. Be a student of the media. If you're going to be somebody who wants to pitch stories, and if you're getting into agency life, you're going to need to know which reporters cover which beats. So you want to watch as much news as you can. You want to read as many newspapers as possible, and just understand who does what and who are these people. Build these relationships, because relationships is the key to public relations, media relations. Now, how does it translate international? It's the same thing. If I'm doing media relations for these 7 countries, I need to know what's going on in those countries. So, for example, if I know the World Cup in soccer is going on in Brazil, I know that I'm not going to be pitching stories during that time because there's not going to be any reporters who are going to care about anything I've got to pitch.
Or going to work.
Right, exactly. And so it's like a big celebration, national holiday over there for that event. If there's political strife in Venezuela, and there's rioting in the streets, and there's all of this chaos and things that are happening, I need to be aware of that, and I need to know what the media is talking about, so that what I'm doing is not going to conflict with what the coverage is overwhelmingly going on there. On the other hand, if there's a situation where there's a growing population of Alzheimer's happening in Argentina, or if there's a lot of people in Colombia that have diabetes, or if there's something that's big that is going on, I need to know about that as well, because I need to make sure that I'm tailoring my pitches and I'm positioning our spokespeople and our procedures and our studies and doing our marketing and promotion to tailor what is going on in those countries. I can't just sit back and just pitch a story here, pitch a story there, and have no idea what's going on over there and think that I'm going to be successful pitching the stories. It's the same way if you think about what's going on here in Jacksonville, what are reporters covering. You have to time your pitches, you have to understand what's going on. If I know there's going to be some local elections that there's going to encompass probably an entire staff at the Times Union for a 2-day period, I know that's not a good time to pitch stories about healthcare. So I'm going to make sure that I pitch my stories around that. It's the same way with these countries overseas. You need to know what's happening over there. So you need to know who the reporters and editors are. You need to know what the outlets are. You need to know a little bit of background about them. And you need to know what's important to them, just like you would need to know what's important to the people here. So just be a student of the media, whether you're doing it domestically or whether you're doing it internationally, and you will be very successful. It is more than half the battle in pitching stories and being involved in media relations.
And what would you suggest when you say that? What would you suggest they read, watch, whatever to do that?
Well, I would say that
because it's hard to.
Like how you
Right.
keep up with.
Yeah.
Well, lucky for you, when I was coming up through college, I'm gonna, for ancient times, we didn't have email, we didn't have the internet, we didn't
Had to
have
read.
Right, you had to read, I remember going into the library at school and reading the newspapers that were there, because then they would subscribe to all the newspapers, all the magazines that you needed to know about. Now you guys can just go online and they are right there. So there are a number of top publications in the major cities, in Caracas, and probably in Brazil. There's probably more publications in Brazil than anywhere else in the world. There's just so many major magazines and daily newspapers and weekly publications, and a publication for just about everything you can possibly think of. And so there's so much media there in Brazil and Brazil is an enormous country, and it's very distinct, just like you said, in France, obviously, in many parts of Brazil. So you have to know a little bit about each section of the country and the culture and what's going on there. So you've got to sort of pick and choose. I mean, you can't know everything, but you got to know a little bit. And so I think over time you'll learn more, just like you would here in America if you are going online every day, and you've got a number of websites that you want to go to every day to know what's going on. And if you're in retail, or if you're in HR technology and you're doing you're pitching companies like ADP and things like that, you're going to want to know the companies or the publications that cover HR and technology and IT and things like that. So, and there are a number of them, so you just have to know what those are. The same way with, and there are a number of television stations here in Florida that market to people from all over the world, and especially in Central and Latin America. So that would be, probably the most important tip I could think of.
Wonderful, wonderful. I tell you what, let's go ahead and give our panelists a hand.